All right, this is one of the final steps in the footstool. What you're trying to do here is to put a stain on your project. Now there's a couple different types of stains that you can use. This stain here is an oil stain. This is basically what you would buy at your Home Depot or your Lowe's or your big box stores. This is a solvent stain. This is what you would buy at a Sherwin-Williams and things like that. There's a big difference between the two of these. This stain is very forgiving, which means if you screw up with it, you have time to work with it, remove it, add more so that you get the consistent color. Where solvent-based stain is not very forgiving. If you screw up with solvent-based stain and you leave it on there for too long, for more than 5 minutes or so, the only way to remove it is going to be to sand it back down to bare wood again. So we usually, with WoodTech One kits, is use a solvent-based stain. An oil-based stain. Now the key with oil-based stain is you have to give the stain time to dry. So if I go and stain this today, I can't go ahead and put a clear coat or polyurethane on this for at least 24 hours. With Minwax, I usually even wait 48 hours. And the reason for that is because if this doesn't dry all the way, and then you put a clear coat on top of it, you may not see it right away, but you have to remember once that clear coat dries, if the stain underneath is not dry, the clear coat doesn't make this dry. So what happens is they dry at two different rates. And so what happens is you end up getting white spots underneath of your finish and in your wood, and it looks like it's part of it. And the only way to get rid of that is to sand it back down to bare wood. With the solvent-based stain, you can put a clear coat on usually within about 8 hours. So that's the difference. So when you see people when they're making kitchen cabinets and things like that, they want to actually speed the process up. So they use a solvent-based stain. The other problem with solvent-based stain is it's very hard to get off your hands. Oil-based stain is a little bit more forgiving. Now that doesn't mean you want to be dipping your whole hand in there at either one of them, but this one here takes solvent to get it off, which means a lacquer thinner or something like that to get it off of your hands, where you can get this off usually with a Gojo or an agitated cleaner, something that will cut through oil. So even Dawn dish soap would usually take this off. Now that doesn't mean it won't dye your hands a little bit inside of the crevices and things like that, but solvent base is very hard to get off your hands. So when you get ready, a couple things you need to have. You need to have a stirring stick. You want to make sure that you stir either one of these up prior to using it. So you want to get consistent color. That's what that does. Same thing with shaking a paint can whenever you go to spray paint. So the first thing you want to do is obviously put some gloves on if you're getting into the stain. With some of the clear coats, you don't necessarily need gloves if you're getting into, as long as you don't saturate your hands. You have to remember when you're putting a clear coat on, you're not dipping your hand in all the way up to your elbow with stain. You're just trying to get, a nice little coat on there, so you don't have to, just like dipping the tip of your paintbrush in. When you stain or you paint, you don't dip your paintbrush all the way to the top of the bristles. You only dip the part in that you need, so the first part of it. If you're painting and you dip this all the way up into the bristles, you're going to have a hard time doing trim and things like that, because eventually it's going to dry up there because you're not applicating paint from the top of where the head of the brush is. You're applicating the paint by where the bristles are down here. So the first thing you do, we're going to grab a screwdriver and open these up, kind of show you what they look like. Now we're not going to use both. I just wanted you to kind of get an idea that you're not going to notice the difference between a solvent-based and an oil-based. They both look the same. They're both a liquid, and you want to make sure you stir them though, because you're going to get different colors if you don't. If you use this can and you finish it up, you want to make sure if you need to get into another can that it's going to be the exact same color. So you want to take your time, stir it up, make sure that you get rid of any solids that are at the bottom. On both of these stains, you will form solids at the bottom, and you need to get it mixed up so that you are able to get a consistent color and the same color throughout your entire project. Now, if you get this stuff on your clothes, Same thing, it's going to be very hard to get either one of these out. You have a better chance of getting the oil-based out or than the solvent-based. The solvent will dry very fast, and you'll end up with a. Now this is a very dark stain, but when you take a rag later and you wipe it off, then it'll actually bring the grain of the wood out. If you just left it like this, and we'll let this dry, and I'll kind of show you what it looks like towards the end, but it'll dry rather quickly. So then what I'm going to do, whenever you stain your footstool, you want to make sure that you don't, the first thing kids want to do is stain the top of their footstool because they want to see what it looks like, because that's the part that everybody sees. But you have to remember, if you stain this, somehow you got to get underneath. So the only way to get underneath is to go like this, turn it around, and then put your wet area back down onto the cardboard. Well, then it screws up your stain that you just put on the top. So you want to start inside of the footstool and then work your way out and around. And the last thing you want to do is your top. So you're just going to dip your brush in. You're not going to saturate it. Like I said, you're painting with the tip of the brush. And you can get kind of crazy with the stain. Just paint it in there, get it in every area, every crevice. Now this is where, if you don't take time to sand your project and do it neatly, this is where you're going to determine whether or not you screwed that up. Because you're going to start to see the stain will come out and you'll be able to see it. So once you'll be able to see glue marks, you'll be able to see pencil marks, you'll be able to see anything that you didn't take time on sanding out. Especially the darker the stain, the worse it's going to look. And this is obviously a very dark stain. Go. Do the other part, other half of it. I'm going to show you here. We're starting to get a little dry already. So what we got to do is we actually got to wipe that stain back off so it exposes. Right now it's real dark. It's almost like a paint. So if you just leave it like that, this solvent-based stain will dry very fast, and your project won't look real good because it'll act more like a paint rather than a stain. So you actually got to wipe that stain back down to bare wood. And I'm going to show you how to do that once we get this entire bottom done here. There we go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my rag and I'm just going to wipe that back down. And I'm not going to scrub it. I mean, you're just putting light pressure just so that you bring the beauty of the wood back out. And I'll show you the difference here between the two sides. So if you look at the difference between the two sides, the area that I wiped versus the area that I didn't wipe, the area that I wiped, you can see that it brings the grain of the wood back out, where the area that I didn't wipe, it's still like a paint. But I don't have a whole lot of time to work with that, so I want to make sure that I get all of that stain back off. Not all of it, but you want to get the puddling or the mass, the majority of the stain that's acting like paint. You want to get that off. And you want to get nice consistent strokes on there so that you don't get big puddles. You want to do it all the way across the whole thing. Make sure you get your stretcher, both sides of it. There we go. Then we can do the legs, and then the final thing we'll do is the top. So I'm going to work on the inside of my legs and then the outside of my legs. This stain goes a long way. A quart of stain will do probably an entire dresser, a big dresser that you had at your house. Stain goes a long way. Remember, you're just dipping the tip of that brush in, getting enough on there. And then once we do the entire leg, we'll wipe it back down with the rag, the same way we did before. Get inside of your semicircle. Even though you won't see those semicircles very much, you still want to get a coat of stain on everything. You want to get the bottom of the feet. I like to seal everything with at least one coat. Now, the reason we can turn this back up, as opposed when I told you before, you don't want to do the bottom of your foot or the top of your footstool first. We don't care what the feet look like. You're never going to see those. They're going to sit on the floor, and you're not going to see them, but you are going to see the top of the stool, you're not going to see the feet of the stool. They're going to be laying on the ground. So we're getting close to getting tacking up here and drying, and that's why with the oil stain, with this stain here, you got a lot more time to forgiving to wipe off. You don't have a lot of time with this solvent paste. It dries rather fast. Make sure you get all your areas. And then we'll wipe everything off. Now, and you want to make sure you wipe off with the grain, the same way you sand it. You don't want to go against the grain, it'll leave smudges on it. There we go. Now, I'm going to wipe all that off. Anything that's splashed back on the stool, you want to make sure you get that all off of there. Get all your areas. The corners are your hardest part because your rag doesn't want to go in there. So take your time. Make sure you get into all the corners. Now, if you wipe this off and you waited 24 hours and you say, boy, I wish it was a little bit darker, you can always add another coat, but you can't add less once it dries. But you can always add more. So that's a general rule of thumb, is it's always better to put several light coats than it is to put one heavy coat. You want to pull your stain. You want to take a look. Don't just do it without looking. You want to make sure you're paying attention to what your project's looking like by pulling that stain off of there. If it looks like there's an area that needs more, put a little bit more on. If it looks like an area that needs pulled a little bit more, rub that rag on there, get it off. The next thing I'm going to do is the outside of these legs, and then we'll do the top. We'll do this leg, and then we'll do the other one, and then we'll wipe these down, and then we'll put some on the top, and it'll be done. Don't forget, we'll have to do the edges as well. If you get an area that looks like it dried and you didn't wipe it off quite as well as you wanted to, you can always add a little bit more stain, and sometimes that what we'll do, that'll soften it up just a little bit, and then you can wipe it back off again. So just double take a look, make sure you got all your areas. Once you do that, you're going to wipe these back off. Remember, your corners are your hardest, so make sure you spend a little time getting the corners, any areas to touch. And actually, I'm seeing that I have a little glue mark, and I'm going to show it to you. Looks like when I glued the stool, I got a little bit carried away with just one little spot, but at least it's underneath the stool, and I'm not really going to see it. Where if you were to do like the dowel pins and leave that glue on there, you would definitely see it, and it wouldn't look real good. Remember, pay extra attention inside the areas. There we go. Now I'm going to show you this little glue mark if it'll zoom in on it. If you look right down there, see right there? There's a little bit of glue I didn't get, and it's hard to see, so that's why I said you want to spend an extra lot of time on sanding to get rid of those glue marks, especially if they're on top of your stool. Now we're going to do the top of the stool and the edges, and this will be done. So take your time, make sure you don't splash this all over your clothes. If you do, you're not going to be happy. You're going to get it on your new clothes. So we do have some aprons around here. If you don't think you can take your time and do it right, like I said, it doesn't really matter what direction you put this on. All you're doing is looking to get a coat on, because essentially all you're doing is wiping it back off. Giving it a chance to set in for a couple seconds so it stains the wood, wee little bit more, and that'll be all I need. And I probably only used a little over a tablespoon worth of finish to get this entire thing done. And like I said, it doesn't look good, and this is where you want to spend your extra time on the areas that you're going to see. So if you were doing a dining room table, you're not essentially too worried about what it looks underneath. You're really concentrating on what it looks like on the top that everyone's going to look at. So all you do is pull your stain off. There we go. Take a look at your edges. Now you can see just from lifting this, I'm getting my fingerprints in it, but we're going to go back with the rag and just touch those up and then look at any other area that I may have gotten fingerprinted in or didn't quite wipe off good enough. So in order to do that, I'm just going to kind of grab from underneath my stretcher. There's a little bit of an area on this leg I want to touch. Take a look underneath all my areas, give everything a nice wipe down like so. If you missed any areas, now's the time to get them. If you leave class and you let it dry, you're going to come in and you're going to be like, Mr. Wells, this looks terrible. I'll be like, I know. You should have taken a little bit more time. And with saying that, you want to make sure you don't want to start this in the middle of a class. You want to start this at the beginning of a class. You want to get yourself set up. Get your tools organized, get your finish organized. I'm going to check everything underneath and then I'm going to hit the top one more time just to make sure I'm okay. There we go. Wipe my hands off, double check my edges. There we go. Now, with these stains, I can't always guarantee what color stains I'm going to have. Usually I don't buy a lot of stains, and the reason is all stains have a shelf life to them. So most of the stains I have are stains that kids have bought and kind of left behind. I don't buy stains every year because everybody wants different colors that match their bedroom or their house or their area that they're going to put them. And if I buy 50,000 different stains or different colors, got a little bit of a mark there. If I buy a bunch of different colors and the shelf life on them is a year, then I have to throw them all in the garbage. So a lot of these are ones that kids will use the previous year that still have a little bit of life left in them. And, we hold on to them. Or, you can obviously take your own home. But if you leave them behind, the kids just use them the following year or they'll buy their own color. So if there's a specific color you want, you can always bring that in. You don't need much. These are quartz. You only need a wee little pint or a little bit. Like I said, I only used about a tablespoon to do this whole thing. So this is done, but it's not done. All that is adding color. Now we're going to have to let this dry for at least 24 hours, and then we'll put clear coats on it, and you'll see the difference. Like right now, it's kind of dull looking. It's not real shiny. You're not trying to get shine out of stain. You're just trying to get a consistent color throughout all the parts on your project, and then we'll go ahead and put a clear coat, and you'll see the difference after we add the clear coat. But that's it for staining. We'll catch up on when we put the clear coat on.